back. Welcome back to Open Your Eyes. We're moving now into our second segment for the morning. And like we mentioned before the commercial break, this segment is actually about elderly abuse, raising awareness on elderly abuse and the signs to look out for when you feel such thing is happening. We've got the professionals in to talk to us about it. Ishel Pott is actually the executive director of the National Council on Aging. We also have Sasha Ely. She's the founder of Home Health Caregivers Association, and Carlette Gentle, who's the founder and director of Life, Living in Full Existence. Ladies, good morning and welcome.
Good morning.
I've got to say before we start, I'm loving the colors, I'm loving the coordination. Once again, good morning and welcome.
Thank you.
You know, this is definitely a topic to reckon with. Everybody have got somebody close to them of wisdom. But things do happen that, for the most part, people are hush-hush when it comes to that. A lot of the times, we see elderly people being taken advantage of in some way, shape, or form. Let's get there in terms of raising the awareness. Ishel, I'd like to start with you. Raising the awareness of elderly abuse. Do you feel it's something that people reckon with? Do you feel that people really think that people are actually abusing the elderly? Let's start there.
Well, I'm so happy this morning to be able to be here to talk to you about this very important topic. I'm also happy that I have Sister Carlette and Sasha with me, because they represent organizations that are on the ground working with older people and with families. And so they see a lot of the reality and what happens out there. Mm-hmm. In Belize, we still believe that we take really good care of our older persons. And in some cases that might be true, but we're seeing more and more cases where older persons are victims of neglect and isolation, and those are two very common types of abuse. The other person isn't able to move about as they once were, and so they are left at home for long periods of time, or we think they're not responding the way they should to certain things, and so we lock them away and we don't interact with them for conversation, or we don't consider the things that they need to be important, and so we don't provide those things. And that happens more often than we would care to admit that it happens. And so elder abuse, yesterday was Elder Abuse Awareness Day, and that's a day that's been set aside by the UN since 2011. And normally around this time of the year, what we try to do is we try to get out, raise awareness, talk about what is elder abuse, what are some of the signs that you can see, and what are things that you can do to adjust. In some cases, it's really just educating families so that they understand the process of aging and how the older person needs support. In some cases, it takes much more than just education. It takes intervention and being able to move people and adjust situations.
What would you say is perhaps the most common form of elderly abuse that we see in the country?
There are three types that we see or we get reported. So the World Health Organization estimates that for every 24 cases of elder abuse around the world, only one is actually reported to authorities.
Wow.
And so what we see, people would call us mostly for the council, and then I'm sure the ladies would be able to tell you what they see from their organizations. People would call us for financial abuse, where an older person is having their resources misused by a family member or a caregiver or someone that they trust. And very often we get that call when there is very little that we can do, because the older person has already signed over the asset. There was no paper trail to ensure that there was an appropriate diagnosis that this older person has dementia, so they are not capable of signing this paperwork over, or they have given their bank book away, they've given away their ATM card to someone that they've trusted, and they've lost complete control over their finances. The other one is definitely neglect. Persons have older family members that maybe they see once a month, maybe they talk to once a week, and there's no real support for the needs of that older person, where that older person can get support or discussing where the challenges are. And then, of course, there is isolation. And that's been one of the things that we've seen escalate with COVID-19, because while we talk about physical distancing, it can't be social inclusion. So even as things are opening up, you find that there are people like, oh, no, you can't go to church. oh, you can't go down the street. And they hold the older person back in isolation. And so those are three that we have seen. And those things lead to greater challenges. If an older person is ill and in bed, it might be that the family doesn't take the time to turn or do not realize the importance of turning that older person and in help. And so there's a lot of education that goes along the way. But I would say the ones that we see the most at the council would be the financial abuse, the neglect, and the isolation.
Wow.
And Carlette and Sasha, since this is the population you work with the most, what do you see on the ground? Let's start with you, Carlette.
Sure. To be honest with you, you could probably be walking down the street and you hear somebody shouting at an elderly person.
That's true.
And that's one. When you go into the home, sometimes Mama, you don't get up and you say, so it's that kind of emotional toll. So that leads to emotional abuse of elderly. They might not physically be putting their hand on that person, but they don't stop to think how those words can impact that person. So we see that one a lot. And right now, I'm trying to figure out something how we could get law enforcement in when it comes to seniors losing their land, because they do sign stuff over without reading it. And later on, when they're saying that I have this piece of land, it's not there. It's not in their name anymore because they signed over to others. So it's a hard thing because when we look at the whole population, we don't necessarily, we say we work with the elderly population, but when you take on that elderly, you're actually working with the whole family because it has to be there in order for, us to collaborate with them in order to work with this person, so that's one of the difficulty. It's a difficulty and it's a blessing because we do have some great family support that's there to help the family. But then when that turns and it's on the other side, then we have to, do more visits and we have to be there to try to counsel this person or just have a caregiver go in to check on them, how their mental state is.
From what I'm hearing, it seems that you've had conversations with them. These are people that you work along with on a daily basis. What are they saying? What are their concerns?
Well, it's hard to talk in the home when family members are around. If they want to share something personally that's probably their family member is doing to them, it's hard to do that. And with COVID, that's exacerbated because they can't necessarily come out. So we would have them come out to social support group. And then that's probably when some of them will probably pull me aside and say, sister, I have to tell us something. So they will tell me a little bit about what's happening because their family members are not around and they feel safe enough to share that. Now, when you're in the home and the family members are around, it's hard for them to share what they want to share. And then even if you say, okay, you're going to give them a call when they're home by themselves, it's a whole different scenario because they might not be hearing you on the phone and then they have to talk loud. So even if somebody's not necessarily there in the home, somebody's in the car that might be hearing them. So it's a challenging aspect of it. But the caregivers, we do have the ones that are homebound. We have them going just to check on them monthly, and conversations just come up, like leisurely, and then something might be explained. And when that happens, then we try to intervene in whatever way possible. But it is getting more difficult with COVID.
Carlette, let me just take the time here to dive a bit into what life in full existence, living in full existence, which you shorten to life, does. You work with a specific population, elderly persons in the south side of Belize City. Why, what were you seeing that made you decide that this was something that needed such a specific focus?
Yes, actually, when I was going to UB, seems like years ago, when I was going there, most of my topics that I chose was working with the elderly. So I did my research around the elderly population, but I realized that there was really not much available to them to access. So when I was finished, I signed up for a grant. And from that grant, I asked for like a research grant. So I basically created a survey that I walked around different parts of Southside to 100 homes, just asking seniors 60 and over if they wouldn't mind answering some questions. And from the questions that I had, that's where life was birthed because the needs were there. And so it's 5 aspects that I focus on that were the needs of the seniors. So basically, it's transportation to and from the medical appointment. Our community, the Sisters of Charity of Nazareth, actually donated a van to us that's handicap accessible, which is a blessing because I used to take them in my car, and to transfer them from wheelchair to car was a headache, and I really was afraid I would pull my back one day. So that it's very helpful to have the lift on the van. Nice. So we transportation. We have a support group where they would come out to, and so they would gather for 3 hours. 3 hours sounds like a long time, right, for seniors? But no, when they were finished at the end of that 3-hour period, they did not want to go home because we do have, it's like a social session. So we have prayer and singing, and then we play bingo. So if I go over in that first session, the assistant said that time for bingo.
I have no doubt. Right? But because the social interaction is so important and often lacking, especially in our elderly population.
Yes.
Let me get Sasha in.
Sasha in.
Sasha, similarly, you found a niche that was also incredibly important in this country, which was providing trained caregivers within the homes. Let's talk about where that came from and what you're seeing on the ground.
Hi, good morning, guys.
Yeah.
Good morning.
It's nice to be back.
Yeah.
Well, I started this because my mom, she was a caregiver, and I used to tag along with her, and I saw the condition that her patients were in, and I saw the need for a home that the caregivers can go to. So on my end, it was like I'm not only helping the elders, but I'm also helping an entire community of caregivers.
Yeah.
What I've seen on the ground since 12 years, it's actually really sad. We definitely do not have that family aspect or dynamics that we think we do in Belize anymore. It's definitely not the same. What I thought that I would be getting, it's not. We receive calls for people who need caregiver, but it's always when it's really too late.
Yeah.
It's always when the bed sores are bone deep. And I can't understand what's so hard in turning a person, to prevent bed sores. It's very simple. It's an easy task.
Just move them.
Move them. So the biggest issue that we would have, I would say, is neglect.
That's the biggest one. How often do you move them? Let's use this particular time to talk about that. How often should you move them? I think that might be one of the cases where people don't even know how often to move them.
Well, if they are, it depends on their condition. If they can get up and walk, then that is what you would do. But you have some cases whereby family members would tell them, you stay there and don't move. So, but if the person is paraplegic or bedridden, they should be moved at least, I would say, 3 times a day, and the area should be kept dry.
Yeah.
And it's something as simple as that. That's a problem that we receive, and we constantly get complaints that, oh my God, as a caregiver, come the lady have bed sore.
Oh my God.
Those bone deep bed sores.
They take time.
Not done overnight.
Yeah, they take time.
Yeah.
That's the complaint that we get. Another one that we get is that the caregiver would mention that there is something wrong with this person. I made a complaint to the family, and the family said, oh well. Or the family said, I will take care of it. and that take care of it last
Yeah.
a year or more. Like they never look into it.
It's heartbreaking when you imagine, because I think sometimes when we say neglect, we think, okay, well, I didn't, people aren't checking in as often. And emotionally, of course, that takes a toll. But the neglect that you're speaking of is adequate care. Ishel, I know you've pointed out before that things like nutrition are also an issue, and also coping with things like the natural aging processes, mobility issues, dementia, and even in some cases, Alzheimer's. Let's put that into focus.
Well, I think Sister Carlette summed it up really well when she said that when she went into working with seniors, it was really working with the entire family.
Yeah.
And that is really what we have to consider when we're working with older persons in Belize. We have less than 200 older people in institutions and over 24,000 older persons across the country. So we're really talking about our older people being in families, in homes, in our communities. And what happens is that we are seeing our families taking on roles, caregiving roles, without being prepared or without thinking about what this might entail. I know it's something here at the council that we have been discussing. How are we going to reach these families? And one of the ways we do have a seminar coming up on the 24th of June on recognizing signs of elder abuse. It's a webinar, and it's really geared towards families. If you have an elderly member, because it is often a family member from the outside that is going to say, you know what, there is something wrong here and I can't put my finger on it. Because the older person themselves will be very hesitant to report any case of abuse. And that's why elder abuse is often considered a silent epidemic. As Sister Carlette said, they're waiting for an opportune moment where their caregiver, the person in charge of them, isn't around so that they can tell you that something's happening. But sometimes it's shame. It's, how am I going to tell someone that my daughter isn't feeding me? How am I going to tell someone that my son has taken my bank card and won't give it back to me?
Yeah. Especially as a mother, that's a tough thing that you'd be asking them to do at that time. So I was going to ask, as an outsider, what are some of the signs that you can look for? So if a elderly lady won't report her children or her caretaker for abuse, what can an outsider see or notice or pay attention to maybe recognize and recognize the abuse and make the report?
In most cases, it would take someone who has known that person. So you are trying to get in contact with the person. Say you're trying to phone them, and you've tried to phone maybe 3 days in a row and you're still unable to speak to that person. Or when that person comes onto the telephone, they are very rushed. They can't talk. They need to go. Or someone who has previously enjoyed something, like, if the person enjoyed just going to the park, you'd see them at the park every week, at least once for the week, and then suddenly it's an entire month and you don't see that person. So in terms of withdrawal, changes in character, the way that you can see that they are some level of depression or sadness, and then a withdrawal. And that's like, I'm sure Sister Carlette would be able to know that something as one of her seniors, if they call you to come to social activity and this kind of feel like do it today. That's not normal, especially when there are so few things that older persons are able to get together and be in a community. So those are some of the things that you can look out for. In the way of financial abuse, one of the things is if an older person suddenly has past due bills. Older people in general don't like owing anybody for anything.
You're right.
Everything needs to pay up front.
It's true.
So if you find an older person who suddenly has, they owe light bill, they owe water bill, they suddenly don't have enough money for things that they used to have money for, and they can't explain it, or they're just like, no, it's all right, and kind of shy away from it. Those are indications that something has happened, something has changed, and whatever the change is, it is not a good change.
Can I ask before, because I do want to ask, I mean, both Sasha and Carlette have really great programs going, and we want to encourage and promote them. But just, Ishel, on that issue of financial abuse, has there been any work on the other end? Perhaps educating people within the lands department, people with at the Treasury, even working with financial institutions to detect signs or develop checks and balances that will prevent the elderly from being abused in this way?
Yeah.
Honestly, Aziz Dakar shaking her head. You know, unfortunately,
Is it too hard? Tell me.
the answer is no. And it's not necessarily that it's too hard. It's well, getting reports and people who want to follow through so that you can document that this thing is happening and that we actually have a problem. Because what we face a lot of time is anecdotal data that people
don't have data.
Story. But then when you go, okay, so I'm going to put your name and your contact information, I go, wait, Miss Scott. So sometimes that is a challenge. Also, the way our laws are set up is that there's nothing really in place for you to be able to protect older persons.
Yeah.
That legal review and reform really needs to be done, and that's something that we need to advocate for and push for.
But you know, Ishel and Sasha and Carlette, we're actually talking about elder abuse and awareness. So while we're doing that, where do we report anything to?
That's a difficulty because it's not necessarily a place that you can go. You might make like we work with the precinct behind here in Southside. And so we would have police come over and basically learn about what we do and, you know, who we work with. And then come in to talk to the seniors themselves about some of these things. Now, that's for us to them, but then when you talk about training for the policemen on how to deal with an elderly, because we have one right in our area that right now she has dementia, and so she feels like everybody is trying to take her land, everybody is stealing her food, and she goes to them constantly. And so every time I could see from my office, police are always over at her home. How do you deal with that? You know, there's not a certain thing or a place that you can go to say, you know, I'm working with this elder. Can you all help me since this is specifically what you do? There's nothing.
So how do we raise awareness if there'll be no justice?
Well, that's the biggest challenge. That's the biggest
challenge, actually.
What has actually been happening, and it's the way we've been coping, it's not necessarily the best way, is that organizations, when we get referrals at the NCA, we make referrals to the Department of Human Services, and then the department intervenes and they're able to bring some resolution in most cases. In some cases, the law is still against you because if an older person won't take a certain amount of responsibility, then the ways the laws are written, you cannot step in and intervene on behalf of that older person. So they are still challenges. And so what you'll see is that these two ladies here, even though the organizations aren't necessarily set up to deal with cases of elder abuse, you find that these are partner organizations that the NCA would call upon to do on-the-ground work and mitigation for older people. So it's not a perfect system, and it's definitely something that we have to really look at, analyze, and see how we can address this issue in a tangible way. Where do older people call for support? Where do family members call for support? There's sometimes it is a family member that's going to be saying, you know, so and so have me ma lock up and I can't talk to my ma.
What?
How do I get around this? And you can bring in the police department, you can bring in the Department of Social Services, but it doesn't always mean that the resolution is what you needed.
Because they can only do so much.
Well, I mean, and let's face the reality here, they have to go back home. So making any report, where would they go, you know,
I was just going to say that.
Go ahead. Yeah, I'm just making that observation. You tell me the experience.
No, but I'm saying, we would probably work with the senior to go ahead and try to make that report, but they still have to go home to that person. There's not
in the same environment
for safety, which makes it so hard because how far would you take this? And the life of the senior is at risk.
Well,
That's the hardest part, when you know something is happening.
So Sasha, let me come to you, being that we just saw you on screen. What is the hope at this point? What do you hope, especially for our elderly?
I hope that the government can provide some type of safety net for the elderly, somewhere that they can go to report elderly abuse. I honestly think that, like with everything else in the country, we lack resources.
Yeah.
Because I know of a case of an elderly abuse case. The right authorities were informed, but they were so slow to move because they themselves, they don't know how to handle the case.
Yeah.
So they try to avoid it.
Yeah.
And it's sad to witness. So I would hope that the government can come up with some type of solution. I know that this solution may entail opening a facility to house these people, because if you cannot remove them from the environment, it defeats the purpose.
Yeah.
So we have a very large task on our hands, but I think that doing shows like these and continuing with the elder abuse awareness, it will eventually help with rectifying the problem.
Ishel, you said earlier there are 200 elderly persons in residential homes and about 24,000
across the
country in homes.
Less than 200 in residential.
Oh, less. Okay, less. And that they're at capacity. And anybody will know it's hard to get a space in residential communities at this point. Now, we don't know what's happening in all of these homes, and we hope that the majority of them, the elderly, especially those who perhaps can't take complete care of themselves, are being taken care of. But what are some of the things that the wider community can do? Because aging is difficult. It's a privilege that not many get to enjoy, but it is a process to learn how to deal with an elderly person as well. It takes, and I think it's a great opportunity to kind of teach people what we can do on the outside to kind of to improve the life and the lives of our elderly population. Let's start with Sasha. You can tap in on accessing home care.
Well, what we've done so far is, whenever I speak to the family, I try to encourage them to give their elderly loved one a say in the process, if they are able to have a say, if they're of some mind to take part, because I do talk to a lot of elderly persons. That's what I enjoy. And the number one complaint I get is that they treat me like pick-me.
Oh.
They treat me like pick-me. I don't like when they treat me like pick-me. So I always try to do my own educating when I'm on the phone with families, even if they're just inquiring about the service. I do try to find out a bit more about the family and the home situation. And it's always just that one family member. The person could have 9 children, and there's always just that one that will be taking care of everything. And I try to find out more information on how it can help and give out more information about how they can contact Michelle. And the only thing I can say that I've done is a lot of educational campaigns, and I've done a lot of other campaigns to raise funds to get. I've done a couple soap drive and pantry drive, and I think there's a company in the US that is willing to donate some wheelchairs and crutches. So that's what I'm working on getting. Other than that, that's the only thing that I see that I can do on this end. Oh, and we're also having a campaign. We're teaming up with this company named Grocery Nest.
Okay.
The reason
Yeah.
we're teaming up with them is because they have Venmo, Cash App, and PayPal,
Okay.
and you can basically supply an elderly with groceries.
Yeah. Oh,
Okay.
nice.
That's good
Yeah,
shit.
that we had them on the show. They do
Yeah.
online shopping, which just makes life a lot easier. But Sasha, people, let's say I have someone at home who's sick and I can't, or I don't know how to take care of them. I can access your service to get a qualified or trained caregiver to come in and administer care, right?
Yes.
Okay. Now, Carlette, let's talk about little things changes that we can make collectively that will improve the lives of our elderly.
That's a big question.
I know, but we
Yes.
have to start.
Yes, and I just think that we have to learn how to work together. We do have our little silos that we're working in, and I think the more collaborative we work, those of us that work with the senior population, the louder our voices will get. So I think we have to start that way. Another thing is basically educating, and that's everybody, or seniors or policemen. How do you know some of these probably diseases or sickness that seniors have? How do you work with them? Even our government officials, because you would think that we're all getting older, that we would want to put something in place for when we get there. That's not a priority, I guess. So just big time education is one of the things that we have to work on as well.
Yeah.
Michelle?
No, I want to echo what Sister Carlette is saying. One of the things that I always encourage people, because the council doesn't run programs, we don't provide services. So when people ask me how do we support older persons, I always tell them, find the organizations in your community that are making the difference and give your time and resources there, because those are the ones that are having the direct impact. And as Sister Carlette said, when we look at what is the continuum of care structure in Belize, which is how we provide care for older persons, you recognize that that is really based on a lot of voluntary and charitable organizations, people who are out there putting in more than their pound of flesh to have things work out for older persons, and they're always in need of more support. One of the challenges that COVID-19 has revealed for the older population is how much older people themselves volunteer for other older persons. You would have a lot of active older people who would still be driving and they would pick up somebody to take them, or they would be distributing meals or providing extra hands. And when the onset of COVID-19 and the vulnerability of older persons, 69% of all the deaths we've seen in Belize have been older people.
Wow.
They have shied away from a lot of those activities, and so the support that they were giving other older people fell away. So, there's ample opportunity to volunteer, and just as these two ladies said, education. Over the last year, the council has been more active in actually hosting family sessions where we sit with families or virtually meet with families and talk to them about creating care plans, about communicating effectively with their seniors, and about managing caregiver stress. That is something that we assume that, you're going to take care of somebody and you're going to know automatically what to do. That happens a lot of times. You think, oh, you might just take care of your mind and be all right. But there are stressors that come with that. There are things that you need to know, and there are activities that you as a caregiver have to do to maintain your own wellness. And so kind of putting the communication on that end has been one of the things that the council has started to do. And then seeing how we can increase our networking and being able to work with a larger group and really hear what people are saying on the ground and where we can intervene. That's why I'm so happy that this agreed to be here today.
I agree. And I do hope that we can take more time to learn more about life and the Caregivers Association. But we've just scratched the surface of this issue, but it is critical that we keep on discussing it more often. Thank you, ladies, for joining us, and best of luck. And we hope that we all will be more considerate towards the elderly population starting today. Thank you.
Thank you, too.
All right. And with that, we're going to go ahead and take a break. And when we come back, we'll find out all about the upcoming Father's Day Wellness Walk being organized by the YWCA. So please stay tuned.